Banks like Capital One are done lending money to anyone and everyone.
Has a $103,000 MSRP.
Make cheaper cars. Our customers, they can't afford them. We can't sell these cars.
Their interest will stack up the more that these cars sit on their lots and don't sell.
They think that this current administration is pushing the EV movement too hard.
In 2019, our sweet spot for selling cars was this right here. It's $2,500.
He's hearing from a lot of Stellantis franchise dealers that this is the worst month that they've had in years.
If all of them sat for a year, that's $2 million in floor plan costs.
We have a major problem right now in the car market that's affecting both consumers and dealers. And what is it? Right now, it's lending. Lending is a big problem. On the consumer side, banks have gotten a lot tighter. And what does that mean? That means that fewer people are able to actually get approved for a loan to buy a vehicle. And there's a good reason for that. See, over the last 3 years, banks were loaning way over the values of these vehicles. We've seen reports of 140, 160% over the value of these vehicles that banks were lending. And no longer, they're not doing that. So they're tightening up their practices, and that pulls a lot of consumers out of the actual buying pool to be able to get approved for these loans to buy a car. Because we know, what do we know? That most consumers, they don't pay cash for cars. They have to get a loan for these vehicles. And if they're going to buy a car, they're going to need to get approved for a loan. And we're seeing this play out through banks, what banks are saying. So Capital One just had a release that said that their originations are tumbling and their delinquencies are on the rise. So what does that mean? That means that that loans that they have written, they're going bad. People are they're stopped paying them. And because of this, what Capital One is doing is that they're pulling back the amount of loans that they're writing to consumers because they know this environment's bad. They're seeing it in their numbers. We're seeing this from a lot of banks right now that they want to pull back on their auto lending. Auto lending space is not a good space right now, and you're going to see more and more banks getting tighter with their lending practices, and this is nothing but bad for the car market. It's bad for dealers, and it's bad for consumers. And what's happening on the dealer side is that their interest payments for the inventory that they currently own are going up. And we know that the car market is not good right now. Demand is not very high. Vehicles are sitting on lots for a lot longer, meaning that car dealers are having to pay more and more interest every single month on cars that they have on their lots that are not selling.
Hey Brandon, Zach here from CarReg, and yeah man, floor plan costs, they are out of control. Let's jump right into it. I went ahead and went to the CarEdge search and I pulled up Jeep inventory for Chrysler Dodge Jeep of Paramus. I just chose a random Jeep dealer so that I could show you this example. They have 706 vehicles, new vehicles in inventory right now, and I sorted them by days on market, being the oldest, like this Jeep Wrangler for example, first. The vehicle I want to jump into though is this 2023 Jeep Grand Wagoneer. Now, this Jeep Grand Wagoneer Series 2 all-wheel drive has a $103,000 MSRP. We'll save it for another video talking about the mistakes Jeep made trying to build six-figure SUVs. But Brandon, I can plug this $100,000 Jeep into my floor plan cost calculator, and I can start to learn some interesting things. The vehicle cost is not $103,000 to the dealer. They pay invoice price, which on this Jeep might be about $10,000 under MSRP, so I'll actually update this to be $93,000. If their floor plan interest rate is 6.5%, that would be incredible. It's likely much higher than that. Think about it, the federal funds rate is not that much lower than 6.5%, and so dealers are likely paying their financial institutions significantly more than that to finance their inventory. Many dealers are paying upwards of 8, 9, and even 10% in floor plan interest every single day. Now think about how long that Jeep has been on that dealer's lot. 365 days? Nope. It's been there for 413 for the purposes of this example. We'll leave it at 365. They've paid $6,000 in interest to have that vehicle sit there just with the hopes of someone coming in and purchasing it at near MSRP.
So we know that banks know that the landscape for these dealers is absolutely terrible. We've had a lot of banks pull out of the lending sector for a lot of these dealers, and that's floor planning. And what we've seen is that banks are not only getting tighter on these consumers, but they're getting tighter with these dealers. They're decreasing floor plans. A lot of banks are completely dropping out of the floor plan space. And that's because they know that a lot of these dealers, once they get into trouble, and they're starting to get into trouble now where they can't sell these cars, they're starting to default on a lot of their floor plans, that it's going to be a lot more risky for these banks to hold a lot of these notes for these dealers.
Now think about it for a moment. They have 706 new vehicles on their lot right now. Let's come back to the floor plan cost calculator. The average price of all their inventory is probably not $93,000. Maybe the average price of all their inventory is closer to $60,000 times 700 for the 700 cars that they have there. If all of them sat for a year, that's $2 million in floor plan costs. So just start to do the math, folks. The floor plan expense for car dealers, it's going up, 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 and it's making it more and more difficult for them to pay their bills.
So for dealers, what you have is a compounding problem where you have vehicles that are too expensive that consumers can't buy. And because these consumers can't buy and they can't get loans to buy these vehicles, they're sitting longer. And when these vehicles sit longer, the costs for these dealers go up because they have to pay more and more interest on these vehicles for their floor plans every single month that they do not move them.
And just to give you an example of this, of how bad it is for dealers, I just read a tweet from Car Dealership Guy saying that he's hearing from a lot of Stellantis franchise dealers that this is the worst month that they've had in years. And a big reason for this is because how high that their MSRPs have risen. And Zach from Car Edge actually responded to this tweet and said, well, you know what? It might be that over the last 5 years, Stellantis' MSRPs have gone up by over 50%. That's absolutely insane for them to go up that much. And what Stellantis, I think the problem is, it's across the whole market in general, but in particular case, your Dodge, Jeep, Ram, with Jeep, they're trying to market their brand as more of a luxury brand, and Jeep is not that. And you can't just flip a switch when prices go crazy and try to market your product to a whole different base. And that's one of the big problems that Stellantis is going to have to deal with over the coming years, and what their dealers are going to have to deal with also, because now their branding is completely different, their prices are completely different, the type of customer that they're wanting to sell their product to is going to be completely different. And especially in an environment where demand is softening, when the car market is getting worse, this is not a time that you want to throw out your consumers that have been loyal to you and try to find a new consumer base. This is a big time problem Stellantis is going to have to deal with, and a big time problem that their dealers are also going to have to face. And this is why you're seeing dealers saying this is the slowest time that we've seen in years, because demand's bad and your prices are too high. And manufacturers, they're not helping it.
So I just put out a post on X showing a downtrend that we're seeing in used car prices, and it shows the volatility of what we've experienced in the last few years, as well as the downtrend that we're on right now. So I wanted to talk about this a little bit as it pertains to dealer floor plans, and especially used car dealer floor plans. So in the car market for used car prices, it's been very volatile over the last couple years, and we're entering in another time of big time volatility, which is tax time for used car dealers. And this is very bad, especially for used car dealers that have floor plans. And I know what you're saying. It seems like, okay, prices are going to spike for a little bit. Dealers are going to sell a lot of cars. How can that be bad for these used car dealers? Well, the reason being is because used car dealers are reactionary, especially the ones that are on floor plans, because they basically have to be. And whenever we get into this time period where there's a big spike in sales, like tax time, then what will happen is these dealers will overexpose themselves on the floor plans. Dealers rush to auction after they sell a lot of cars from these tax refunds that come in, and then they pay too much at auction, and then the money goes away. So what happens after tax time is all these cars that they paid way too much for, they end up sitting for a long period of time on these dealers' lots, and that means that they're going to have to pay more money in floor plans. Their interest will stack up the more that these cars sit on their lots and don't sell. So it's kind of a double-edged sword when you think about tax time. Yes, dealers are going to sell more, but because they're so reactionary, they reload back up all their inventory. They pay too much for it. So tax time is actually kind of the worst thing that happens to a lot of these dealers, because they end up just getting themselves overexposed, and they have to pay a lot more on their floor plans that they wouldn't have had sales just remained steady and not peaked and crashed. And you can see this volatility in the used car prices from this chart right here. And I even show you where I think prices are going with tax time coming up. And I'm going to share a lot more of this stuff on X going forward. And if you go follow me on there right now, any replies I get to that post, the night that this video is posted, I'll reply to every single one of them.
All right, so we have a survey out from Automotive News that surveys dealers, and one of the biggest problems that dealers are citing in this market right now is, one, affordability, and two, the actual profit margins from their vehicles. So a big concern for affordability, even from the dealer side. We've talked verbatim about this on the consumer side. Consumers cannot afford these cars right now. They're too expensive. And that's now starting to hit these dealers. The problem that dealers see is that their volumes are greatly decreasing because they just can't move these vehicles that manufacturers are pushing out to them. There have been countless cases of manufacturers, even Mercedes-Benz dealers, have sent letters to manufacturers saying, make cheaper cars. Our customers, they can't afford them. We can't sell these cars. And then when that happens and they have to lower the prices at these dealerships, it's cutting into their margins. This is a massive, massive deal for a lot of these dealers, because the cars that manufacturers are sending them, one, they can't sell them, and the ones that they are lowering the prices enough to actually get them into customers' hands, they're not making enough money on them because they have to lower them so much, and it cuts into their profit margins. Dealers are hurting right now, and they're begging these manufacturers to do something different. Give us cheaper cars so we can actually put butts in seats. And manufacturers are not doing that. What are they doing? They're continuing to produce these high margin for the manufacturer products. And this is not what is moving right now. What is moving right now is the lower end of the spectrum, things that people can afford, these smaller four-door sedans. And we've already seen them come out of the market. Manufacturers do not want to make them. What do they want to make? They want to make these big F-150s. They want to make these big luxury SUVs that are not moving on dealers' lots. And something has to change if dealers are going to be able to move metal, and if consumers are going to be able to actually be able to afford these vehicles. Manufacturers, they are not getting with the program.
And now I've seen all of these crazy price increases unfold here at my car a lot too, even at my price point. See, in 2019, our sweet spot for selling cars was this right here. It's $2,500. That's where we would sell a majority of our cars at. But now we fast forward to the crazy times where prices have been crazy elevated, and now our price point is $3,500. And even getting to that amount, that average, that sweet spot that we like to be in for our customers, it's still very hard to find the kind of cars to be able to sell at that price point. As you see these prices behind me, a lot of them are over that price. But if we can get cars in that $3,500 range, that is our sweet spot. That's where we like to be. But it's just crazy to think that not just 3-4 years ago, our sweet spot was $2,500. And just to think about a car that you can find for $2,500 right now, it almost does not exist.
And if all of this wasn't bad enough, dealers have recently been surveyed saying that they think that this current administration is pushing the EV movement too hard. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing that dealers do not like the direction that these manufacturers, this administration, is pushing in their movement for these EVs. And we've seen from specifically Ford that a lot of these dealers are against doing a lot of these build-outs for these EV programs because it's just vehicles they're not moving. If you go to any Ford dealership right now, you can see Mach-E's, you can see Lightning stacking up at these dealerships. And what dealers are saying is these EVs are not moving on their lots. So they do not want to spend more money to roll out more of these EVs for them to potentially not sell and just have them sitting on their lots. So this EV movement is not something that these dealers like. And we can see this in the survey. They do not like the direction that this administration is going with EV rollout.
Dealer side, what's happening is something called,
Excited to be in another video. Let's do it.
There's a truck. Banks like Capital One. There's another truck. Train. Let's go let it roll. And show you like the peak and the valley. And no. I'm not doing this. I can't.
First take, man. That wasn't so bad. Hope you can use it. Take it easy.